Welcome to this Fane online event. I am Chanté Joseph, and today I am going to be in conversation with the fabulous Kiley Reid, who's going to be talking to us all about her new book, Come and Get It. Hello, how are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat.
I'm really excited to talk with you. I think your book is amazing. I think you are such a talented writer. Your voice is so necessary. The work you do is just like, it just feels very like on the money. I feel so seen in so many of the characters that you write about. And so I'm looking forward to getting into your mind and how you work and your ideas. And I kind of want to start just a bit about your journey.
Yeah.
Kind of in summary, like what are, I guess, the main decisions or factors that put you here in this room with me now? What is it that made you want to become a writer?
That is a really great way of putting it. I have been writing for a long time. I think like so many writers, okay, it's a bit cheesy to say, but I do think that being a writer, there's something physical and chemical about the way that you look at the world and the way that you gather information and how you see stories. So I've been obsessed with storytelling for as long as I can remember. I was always writing novels and poems and filling up notebooks, and that was just something I thought I could do in private. And so I went to university for acting and religious studies. I was all over the place. My parents were like, do you want a job? Like, ever? What's going on there? But I thought I wanted to be an actor. I still love plays a lot, and I thought that that was the mode of storytelling that I wanted to do. And so I did act for a little bit, doing a few small things afterwards, but I was still writing all the time. I would write my monologues, and I would lie to my professors about where they came from. They would be like, where is this from? I'd be like, oh, it's this black play. They'd be like, oh, yeah. I'm from, of course, I know that one. And I would just write them, and that was it. And then after I graduated, I was still working as an actress, but I was also nannying and doing a bunch of other jobs. And I booked a commercial for Google Wallet, and it was paying me $500. And I was like, I made it. This is it. And I shot it on my birthday, and I hated it. It just was not a creative outlet that was serving me. And I understand that, like, for many actors, they're like, you serve your time doing commercials and things, and then hopefully you get something later. But I just got nothing from making sure like a product was a certain way, or I just like wanted to be behind the scenes. And so I took a writing class in New York at Gotham Writers Workshop, and my teacher on the last class wrote on the back of my paper, I think you have real talent, keep going. And like many other writers, you just live off of that comment for the next 4 years. She told me I have to keep going, so I'm gonna keep doing this. So I was a receptionist. I worked a bunch of other jobs. I applied to graduate school for creative writing, and I got rejected at 9 different schools.
Okay, so how did you push through that? Because one thing about me, I love to give up. At one hurdle, okay, let's wrap it all up. I'm done.
You don't need to tell me anything else. I mean, there are other things that I've tried and quit very quickly. But with writing, I think what kept me going was that I never saw writing as like a profession. So I was like, I just need to reach financial stability that I can write in my free time. And like, let me just figure that out. So my husband got a job offer at the University of Arkansas, and he said, do you want to come with me? And I said, sure. So I went and I got a job at a coffee shop, applied to graduate school again. I got into 9 schools that time, went to the University of Iowa. And that's kind of where I became a writer, was in Arkansas and Iowa. And so I'm really happy that my book is based in the place that happened for me. Yeah.
And who were, I guess, the people that you were reading that kept you inspired and kept you wanting to pursue writing?
Ooh, during that time, I was all over the place. I did read Donna Tartt a lot. I think she's so great. I don't know if you're a secret history person. She's so good. That's like the best like stamp of a campus novel, I feel. Who else was I reading? I didn't read James Baldwin until I was in college, and then it blew my mind a bit. Who else was I reading? I can't remember. It's all such a blur, I feel. I liked Dawn DeLillo at the time. I was reading ZZ Packer, and I got to meet her as well. Yeah, it was a lot of people just thrown in there. Yeah.
No, I love it. And also you said you were kind of writing articles as well at the time as well. I mean, you didn't really enjoy that, but was there anything about that sort of like article or feature writing that kind of allowed you to, I guess, practice writing, but also kind of put your ideas out there and flesh out your ideas?
You know, now that you say it like that, it kind of was my first foray into interviewing people, into listening to how people talk and gathering information. But it was they were really chill. It was like, there's a flower shop opening or whatever. It wasn't like big articles or anything or like what you do. But I think any kind of writing is great practice for later. So yeah, just little side hustle jobs.
Yeah. And so your first book, Such a Fun Age, absolutely incredible.
Oh,
Did
thanks.
so well, bestseller. And so what was the time between writing and publishing that book and then writing and publishing Come and Get It? How did that kind of work? Was there crossover? Was it this one's done, now I'm starting the next? Or did you have time?
Lots of crossover. So I sold Such a Fun Age after my first year of grad school, and then it wasn't coming out until a year and a half later. It takes so long. And then it comes out and you're like, what did I even write about this so long ago? But I wanted to start a new project. I was in graduate school and I had free time, and I was like, don't waste this time. And so I started Come and Get It 10 months before Such a Fun Age came out.
Wow.
And so, but starting a project for me is mostly reading and like gathering information. So I was reading a lot. I was interviewing a lot of students and just figuring out what I wanted to write about. I interviewed a group of students in their apartment, and I ended up writing about that experience for the foreword of The Great Gatsby when I went into the public domain, so you can see it there. But I just wanted to keep working because I don't know about you, but like I get antsy and I want to like get under another project real quick.
And did you have any kind of like fears or anxieties because the first book was so incredible? Did you feel like, oh, I need to live up to this, or was it just like, I'm gonna put this out here and I'm doing something that I enjoy irrespective of how it's received? I know I'm enjoying it.
Okay, I'm not playing with this, I promise. Of course there's pressure, but there was something about the second novel that felt like a freebie. It was like, you had the big book. My thesis professor said to me, you already did the big one, do this one just for you. Like, write the book that they would have never let you publish in the beginning, and like that Such a Fun Age kind of let slip in the door. So that was kind of what I was thinking about the entire time. I also like a little bit of pressure, and I hope I have a long career, and my agent was really good about saying to me, I'm here for the big ones and the ones that are a flop, like I'm here for the whole thing. And so I'm happy that both of them worked out at different levels, but I like a little bit of pressure too, so I welcome it. No,
I love that. Also, listen, it's going to do well. It's such a good book.
Thank you.
I want to understand a bit more about where the idea for Come and Get It came from, particularly this kind of fascination with like money, women and money as well.
Totally. The inspiration here was a book called Paying for the Party, How College Maintains Inequality. It's written by 2 sociologists. So they did a 5-year interview study at a Midwestern university where they interviewed young women in a dorm and followed them from freshman year to beyond. And they refer to their journeys as pathways. So there's like the party pathway, the career pathway, and it's showing who college works for and who it doesn't work for. So I was really interested in all of the research and data that they found, but I really just liked the premise of like these very academic women interviewing these young, very casual women, figuring out who they were in life. So that's where I started. I never go into a novel being like, I'm going to talk about money, consumption. Like, I never like start with the themes. I have to start with people. I stole this from someone, and I don't know who I stole it from, but I use it in my classroom. I like to think of it as a triangle, and the bottom layer is people, and that's where you start. The middle layer is conflict, and the tiny little triangle on top is theme.
Okay.
And if you start with theme, you're going to tip on over. Because you can't like theme your way into a story. Like, I have to get obsessed with the characters and what they're doing, because you're going to be with them for like 4 or 5 years. So I always start there, and I do have a penchant for money, but the dorm quality of the book kind of pushed the consumption factor to the front. So I was obsessed with like what people were buying and filling these tiny little spaces with.
And how did you come up with these characters? Because they're all very distinct. Like, they all kind of blend together in some ways, but they're all very different. And none of them feel like caricatures, and you're not mocking any of them, but they're all kind of very layered individuals. So how did you kind of come up with these protagonists?
You know, sometimes I'll just start with, all right, what's like, sometimes one character is built from another one, if that makes sense. So Kennedy came from a book I read about our economy and living in a class society. She was born out of this like phenomenon of being crippled by choice, which I can relate to. I don't know about you. Yeah, you're like, well, I know myself, I should know what to pick, but there's so many options, what do I do? And so that's kind of Kennedy there. And so I thought, okay, who's the worst possible roommate for Kennedy to have? And that was Tyler, someone who's very sure of herself and her choices, someone who loves dogs and wants a dog so bad, someone who doesn't want to do anything with Kennedy, and someone who has this social cachet that can't be replicated very easily. So some characters are formed from other ones, and other ones I'm just like, I want someone who Millie would think is really cool. Like, what would be really attractive to Millie? And then as I try to get to know them, I make lists, I make kind of diary entries, I'm just adding layers and layers. And then you reach this weird tipping point where they kind of show you who they are.
Yeah.
Like, you take them to a certain point, and then when you have them make a decision, you're like, oh wait, no, she wouldn't do that. That's not her. And they kind of help you out from there.
And are there ways that you, when you're kind of writing storylines, you're like, this doesn't sound quite like them? Do you kind of check in with like a list of like qualities or attributes and say, this doesn't match up, this doesn't make much sense?
100%. I literally have lists of like idiosyncrasies that certain characters have, and I try and stick with those. And in the beginning, it's hard because your voice is still so loud in the beginning. And so I had a girlfriend of mine who's a brilliant writer, her book is coming out this year as well. I had her read some opening chapters, and she's like, okay, you would think this is funny with this character. You think this is funny. Like, you need to like pull yourself back. And I think it's nice to have someone check you and make sure you're like achieving someone else's voice and not your own.
Yeah. And so Comic Edit is kind of set on a campus, and there are several girls. They kind of have very different lives, but they all come together, and through them we kind of look at things like consumption, we look at capitalism, womanhood, identity, age, class. There's so much that happens. But I kind of want to know why setting this on a college campus was so important, and what is, I guess, the role of the college campus in American society, because it looks very different here.
Totally. Okay, I have way too much to say on this. Okay, I was really interested in exploring consumption through a dorm situation. I think it's this weird time in a lot of Americans' lives where like you curate your dorm to your personality, even though you're figuring out what your personality is. And that within the realm of a college seemed like a really ripe opportunity. A college dorm within the United States is a really interesting place and time in your life, because it's probably one of the only times that you will live in a walkable area. It's like a paradise island. Like, you can like walk to your friends and go to the grocery store and go to a game or go to an improv group. Like, everything is just right there for you, and that doesn't really happen again the same way. And so there's all of these amazing like shared resources, and like someone's grandma bought a library that you can just use, and everything is just right there for you. But it's a bit like a mall in that it's like a facade and like promises of a better future, that the rest of life will be like that, when really it's just a small time in your life. This is weird. Stay with me on this. When my grandmother died, at her funeral, I was talking to her sister, and I knew that they were poor, but I didn't know how poor they were. They were poor, like asking the church for food and not having running water. And her sister said that they would go to this public pool in their neighborhood twice a week, so they knew they could shower like on Tuesdays and Fridays or whatever. So I got obsessed with public pools and the history of them and how they became such a source of like segregation. And I learned how they used to be put into poor neighborhoods so that they would shower to inspire hygiene and like all these crazy things. But the biggest thing that I learned that I keep thinking about within books like this is that there used to be public pools that everyone used. Like, no one had pools in their backyards. And if you were having a birthday party, if you were fighting with someone, if you were dating someone, if y'all broke up, you still have to go see them at the pool and like figure it out. And now everyone has a private pool, and they don't have to communicate with people in the same way. So for me, this dorm was kind of reminiscent of that, of like, you have this amazing shared space, but everyone is in their room and not having to like talk to people like they used to. And when you bring in money and technology, it's like taken to another level. Like, when you and I were probably growing up, like, we didn't like Venmo request people or like Cash App or anything. And like, if someone owes you money, you need to like tell them. You can't just like do a little thing on your phone. And so I wanted to play with what that loneliness looks like on a campus as like a model of living in a class society.
And it's really interesting because on American campuses, you could share dorms. Like, you share a room with someone. Like,
I did.
It's you and someone else. Like, there's a bed there, there's a bed there. Whereas like, in the UK, it's not really like that. Everyone kind of has their own rooms. You have a shared kitchen space. You might have a shared like communal area. but very rarely do people share rooms with other people. And so I kind of found that really fascinating. And like you say, in terms of like really confronting people and confronting issues, like you have to do that. You have a roommate. Like you're not sleeping by yourself. There's someone else there. So I find that sort of like, well, I guess it's the theme, right, of like an invasion of privacy. I guess not necessarily an invasion because it's built that way, but it's like you're never really truly alone. No. And I find that really interesting about an American campus, that it's like there is someone there all the time. Like you can't. It's a
wild experience. Have you ever had a roommate like that?
No,
it's crazy.
I've always had my own. Even at uni, I had my own bathroom as well. So I never had to interact with anyone. But then my accommodation burnt down on my second, my like second week of uni.
Were you you living in the dorm?
Yeah, well, I was at a lecture, and then from the lecture hall, we were like, "Oh my gosh, what's going on over there?"
No.
We left. We're like, our accommodation's on fire.
Was all of your stuff gone?
Everything was gone. Like we had instruments, so we got lots of stuff back. But I'm like, that's my recollection of university. I was like, that's crazy.
Wow. Burned to the ground. That's
the whole thing is gone because some silly student left oil in the chip pan, and so then when it blew up, he tried to put water on it.
That's the worst thing you can do.
And that's it. Like these kind of young students are coming into this space. They don't know how to do anything for themselves, and they're expected to just live. So that's why I think the setting of a college campus is really interesting.
It's so like it's people coming in after their parents have done a number of things for them their whole life, and they're carrying all the values from their home. They're like meeting new people for the first time, not knowing how to like cook and do laundry and all of these things, and it's like this really heightened experience in your life because you're like on your own for the first time, but still very alone. But then in the United States, we have this RA role, this resident assistant role that's kind of like a babysitter, but not. It's like it's a weird liminal space for everyone. I cannot believe your dorm burned down.
It was absolutely insane. It was crazy. I should write a book about that.
You should. I'd read that.
And you've spoken about like the college campus being a transitory space, like kind of one of those places in your life where you're still forming, molding, learning about your environment, but kind of getting ready to move on to something new, and that coming with its own anxieties and its own pressures. And I wonder if you feel like past college, if there's any sort of space that exists like that in your life, or and kind of any era you will exist in that will be similar to that of a college campus, or does it kind of begin and end there?
Oh, you mean like in general?
Yeah.
People? That's such a good question. I don't know. I mean, there are so many jobs that people have in their 20s that people view as like character building. I'm putting quotes around that. And, you know, like it's kind of like the equivalent of like a starter home, but for some people, like your starter home is other people's dream home and things. So you don't really know what that is for everybody else. I'm not sure if there's a place like that. I also just believe that college isn't for everybody, and college was not like the road to financial success like 80 years ago. I think that's when everyone started going a lot more. So it is funny that you have this like, now it's like this hot like center for like growing up as a dorm, and it used to not be like that. Like people used to grow up in very, very different ways, or they would have children when they were 22 and things. So I don't know if there's another space, but I think that there should be to figure it out.
There definitely needs to be. I feel like I mean, it's kind of in this book, that sort of anxiety of like what comes next. There doesn't feel like there's any space quite like being a student, and then you kind of think about the rest of your life you have to live, and you're like, I don't get the chance to be this insulated again. Because I feel like obviously money is such a huge thing here, and it wasn't until I went to university that I kind of understood wealth disparities. I kind of grew up in a kind of poor area, like it was mainly a black and brown area, and it wasn't until I got to uni that I was like, oh my gosh, England is really white. Because I went to a school where the majority of people were black and brown. I'd never really experienced that sort of being a minority or feeling like less than until I went to university, and I was like, this is a completely different world. And that adjustment was particularly difficult for me. I remember like I did cheerleading, and I was like, you know, majority white cheerleading team, and I remember one of the girls kind of coming into the session really upset, and everyone was like, what's wrong? She was like, oh, I left 50 pounds worth of cocaine on the bus.
Girl,
I was
what?
like, what? And it was just like, wait, you live like this, like this is your actual real life. And so I find the sort of analysis or exploration of class, particularly in the university sphere, so interesting, because you're just confronted. There's no sort of easing into this, and it's very difficult to not build resentment, because this is the first time you're exposed to this sort of money. But in the UK as well, it's really interesting because money is a very it's a sticky topic. People don't talk about money. It's a very kind of British stiff upper lip thing where it's rude essentially to be seen talking about money, which is a problem because we should, because then you know if you're being undercut and whatnot, but it's very hard. And I wonder for you, how did you develop this sort of confidence to tackle the topic of money so bravely?
That's a great question. I feel that the moment that nonfiction kind of opened up to me, that's when I wanted to learn more. I always thought that I wasn't like smart enough to like dip into academic text, or like that's like over here and I'm over here. And as soon as I listened to a few podcasts of professors and sociologists who just said things in really like simple terms that I can understand, I was like, oh, then maybe I should buy their book. Maybe I should do this. And that gave me a lot more confidence to go out and ask people questions. We were talking about loneliness too. People are lonely, and asking them questions about themselves makes them feel like they're heard and they're excited to share. I always paid my students $15 for 45 minutes of their time. But most people who I offered money, they were like, oh no, go donate it. Like, I'm just happy to help. I'm happy to talk. Like across the board, it was just like people wanting to share their lives. And so I definitely got more confident as I went on. I have to be cool, because some people will reveal things sometimes. And I'm like, that's crazy. Like, that's not part of like that's like your situation of like this 50 pounds of cocaine or whatever. It's like, wait, wait a second. I just did an article and I got to ask a lot of young women how much money they have, just like in my book. And some of the girls who were like 21 years old said I have $2,000 in the bank, and some of them said I have $30,000 in the bank at the same age. And the distance between those two numbers is staggering. Like, I think that people don't understand how many more mistakes you can make in your life and figuring out what you want to do if you have that support than if you don't. And that's going to change the entire trajectory of your life. Like, that you have a safety net, that you don't have to worry about those things. So I feel that I completely understand people feeling like it's gauche or rude to talk about money because that's how they've been raised. But I think when you think about, okay, well, why would someone tell you that that's rude or gauche? It's because they're uncomfortable with the fact that they make so much money when they don't work harder than everyone else. And that is not tied to their morality. Like, I don't think any one person, no matter how much money they have, is like responsible for the fact that there is that huge disparity. So for me, when I zoom out and say like, well, yeah, the system is weird and lets some people make nothing and make everything, then it's like everyone, their morality has nothing to do with it. And so you don't have to feel awkward about who you are in a conversation about money. And
when you're interviewing these students and you're talking to them about, themselves, their lives, experiences, their money, was there anything that really shocked you, particularly in comparison to maybe your experience of college?
All the time. There were so many things I was like, you should not tell me that. Okay. I remember a young woman who was white, who was in a sorority. I was asking her about the recruitment process because she was like the recruitment chair. And there's a black fraternity and sorority on campus as well. And so I was like, okay, when you do your recruitment process in this big bid day, are the black fraternities involved as well? And she was like, oh, no, it's just the normal ones.
Not the normal ones.
Okay, so it's my job in that moment. I gotta be cool though, you know what I mean? And then she was like, oh, no, I'm not saying they're not normal. It's just, and for me as a writer, that's like gold because I want to replicate that reaction. Because I think when you're asking questions, things are revealed sometimes that they're not ready to reveal, but that's what I want to read a book for, is like deep human behavior and like reality in those ways. So yes, all the time people tell me things. I'm like, I don't believe that's correct right now. People would tell me over and over that they feel like it's rude to talk about money, but that they love talking about money. And so they were happy to do those things as well. And mostly I'm just grateful that they would share with me.
And you kind of talk about this book being about buying things and this obsession with consumption and what it tells us about ourselves or how we use it to present our world for ourselves. And you have these very detailed descriptions of these dorm rooms that I'm just like, and I can see it and I can visualize it. But what was it about using, I guess, the dorm room and all of the tiny little details? Like, why were you so particular about that in terms of making it like kind of big embellishments in the story?
Yeah. I love it when a novel works the same way that we do. And so an example of that in Such a Fun Age is a lot of people came up to me being like, should I like Kelly? I'm halfway through. Like, I don't know if I'm supposed to like Kelly. But that's exactly what I wanted for them to be experiencing Amira's journey with him of like, okay, he's cute. Okay, that was weird. I don't know. And so the way that items worked in this novel was kind of the way that I wanted the roommates to work. Like, okay, I don't know this person. I'm going to be living with them. What do they have in their room? Like, what can I gather about them from their purchases? And there's like the simplistic purchase of like, oh, I needed hairspray. But then there's the deeper like, I want it to be expensive. I want it to smell like this. I want it to smell white. I want it to like be Southern. Like, I think all of those things are filtering into who these people are. So if you can believe it, all of those dorm room descriptions, there used to be 100 pages more of all those things. My editor was like, what is going on?
Reel it back. Reel it back.
I was like, okay, fair. But I could personally read about descriptions of young people's rooms for days. I think it's fascinating, the items that we surround ourselves with that like make us feel like a grown up or smarter or better. And so that was a big part of this novel. Yeah.
And like this novel's set in 2017, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like around 2017.
That's
so
right.
it's like, it feels like kind of recent of the time. And so there's a lot of references, I guess, to pop culture, like, you know, even like someone vaping in the book or something like that. It feels like, okay, this feels very fresh. This feels very now. Like, why was it so important to have those sort of references in at the time? Do you feel like sometimes when you put things like this in a book, it kind of dates it and it keeps it kind of frozen in that particular time, or did that not matter to you at all?
It does matter. I want to be as specific as I can, and I want it to feel very much like that time, and so all of those references are very carefully chosen. I had a research assistant for this time around, and so it was really fun to be like, okay, would Tyler wear this jacket, or what about this cologne, or I don't think this is popular, or here's an article about this. So that was really important to me. This sounds crazy. I am fine dating a time with items, events. Like I talk about how the salt and wort factory collapsed in one chapter, and that actually happened during that year. I'll talk about anything except for the presidents who are elected.
Oh, really?
There's something about it when you mention a president's name that kind of,
because you reference the election,
yes,
2016 election,
exactly.
but you don't.
But
you don't say.
Oh,
okay.
I don't know what it is, but as soon as I read a president's name, it almost makes me feel like annoyed. I'm like, I'm not reading the news. I'm reading a book. Like, I want to get lost in this world. So I'll do anything but a president's name. Yeah.
And between, I guess, 2017 and 2024, like, times have changed so much.
Yeah.
And do you feel like if you were writing this considering where we're in now, like, you know, we're in the TikTok era, consumption is a huge thing.
Huge.
Like the Stanley Cup. Like, just
oh my God.
that one cup. I'm literally, if you were writing this book now, it would be like all the girlies would have their little Stanley Cups, and there's a sort of idea of like, particularly on campus, like people being quite homogenous. And I saw you talking about the fact that, you know, you'll see people wearing the same outfit and you're thinking, is there something on? But it's like, no, everyone has to dress this way. And I guess in your opinion, like, why is it that you think that people are buying stuff because they want to kind of express themselves, but they are being just like everyone else? So are our consumption habits actually a reflection of who we are or who we think we should be?
The latter, who we think we should be. It's amazing, like the power that capital has over us to make us think that we are making new, unique choices for ourselves. I'm dating myself, but do you remember when Avril Lavigne came out? Like, I was a huge Avril, because I was like,
the little roll-up thing, the hair.
And she was like, came out, and it was just like, are you not like other girls? Okay, this girl is for you. So everyone's like, oh no, I'm different, I'm alternative, I'm gonna like this person. It's like, no, this whole brand was created for you to like in response to everything else. And I think that that's a lot of the things that we're buying right now.
Aesthetics and eras.
Yes, completely. And yeah, everyone dressed so similarly at University of Arkansas. It was all big shirts, tiny little shorts, Birkenstocks. When I went to University of Iowa, everyone was wearing Hawkeye gear, black and yellow. Everyone had Iowa stuff. And now at the University of Michigan, every single student of mine, baggy cargo jeans, little baby midriff, every single one. I'm just like, who told you this? This is crazy. It's so homogenous, and so I'm always trying to nail those things down. But here's another thing though, when it comes to references like that, I feel that things make more sense in the rear view, and you can kind of understand the way that trend worked. We're still seeing the trajectory of the Stanley, because now like the 7 and 8 year olds are like, oh, this is amazing. So I think it's going to have a big fall off in other people's minds. So yeah, we'll see how the Stanley Cup does.
And also, like it gets younger and younger as well. I think there was an article, I think it was maybe in the Cup, where they talked to children about like, you know, what's cool, and you know, they say things like, you know, no one wears coats. Even in the playground, we don't wear coats. Coats are really uncool. We like to wear this. And I'm like, you are children. Like, it's really interesting to see how at such a young age they now have such a grasp of buying things and how buying things reflects on them. Like, where those kids now, where does it kind of go for them? Like, how are they going to behave, or what are they going to be like when they're in college if they're already behaving like this now?
I'm scared. I don't know. Have you heard of the millennial pause? Have you heard of this?
I have, but I feel like I don't know if I should explain it.
Yeah, apparently, if you're a millennial like myself, when you go to record yourself.
Yeah, oh my days, yeah, I edit it out.
Yes, edit it out. It's like this new generation is like so ready with the camera all the time. And I'm like, what does that mean for everyone's future? Like, I think we all are messed up in different ways. I'm just very curious about what technology will do here.
Yeah, it is actually quite scary. I'm trying to be like more online that way, but I'm a Twitter girly. I've kind of always been, I've been on Twitter since I was in school, and so there are people that have followed me on Twitter since I was like in year 10, you know, like maybe just like in high school, I guess it would be.
Okay, how do you feel? Because Twitter has taken such a change.
It has taken a turn for the worse, but also the video is really stressful for me. I find it hard to just be walking down the street like, anyway, so blah blah blah. Like, I have to be sat, I have to be ready, I have to know what I'm talking about. It doesn't come natural to me. But my little sisters, they'll just like whip out the phone, dance, and then and I'm like, how do you guys do this? I find this so uncomfortable.
I feel so rude at the idea of ever doing anything like that. So I'm gonna leave that to the youths right now. Yeah.
And I want to talk a bit about the women of the story. I mean, they're predominantly in the story, but particularly the relationship between older women and younger women. I find that online a lot, and maybe in a lot of literature as well, like the older woman is the pinnacle of wisdom. It's very difficult to see her as like a kind of multi-dimensional character, and in this you kind of have Agatha, who is this like older academic, basically using this young black girl to essentially get her to get these stories so she could continue to write about and exploit the kind of private information of young girls. Like, what is it that you kind of wanted to show in those sort of relationships between older and younger women?
Sure. I think I'm very interested in what we perceive as sophisticated and what that does to our judgment. I don't know about you, but when I was little, my mother always told me, if you're ever lost, find a black woman who's dressed nice and she'll help you out. And I understand that sentiment, like you want your daughter to be safe and you're like, okay, let me send her to this person. But I also think that does something to our brains in terms of like our judgment of what people are doing. Millie is a young woman who is a hustler. She's very ambitious. She wants to buy a house and have stability. And she sees someone like Agatha, and it's like what you think a professor is like when you're 10 years old. You're like, oh, wow, you like really know your stuff. Agatha's minimalism and the way that she talks and the way that she holds a pen. Millie is like, oh, this person is like amazing. I want to be like her. And those feelings get really, really intense for her. And so I think that her age, her clothing items, the way that she speaks, kind of jumble up Millie's judgment as to what she's doing. She's like, well, if she doesn't think it's bad, like why would I? She knows what she's doing. I don't know better, so it's fine. So I definitely think that in terms of the women relationships, that age does play a role here. I'm also really fascinated by people who use certain geographical spaces to exercise their demons a bit. When you're like, oh, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, you know, kind of attitude of like, well, I'm not at my home and this isn't my school, this is in the South, no one cares about this. And so Agatha's definitely doing a little bit of that. And so I think that together, everything that they're bringing from their ages to their money to, you know, what they're using each other for, it can never really end well.
Because I mean, the whole idea of like basically money being a huge kind of factor in terms of controlling other people. And I guess controlling, I don't know if that's the right word, but in some ways
motivating,
it kind of is. It's like Millie wants to buy this house, right? And so it's like, I know that if I do this, I can get this money and it will put me in this position. And so in a weird way, it's like you kind of don't feel like you can make a choice. And also there's a racial element in it as well that I find quite interesting. It's like, you know, I'm this like older, more established white woman and I'm going to help you get to where you need to get to, but you need to do this thing for me. And it kind of like feels a bit exploitative because it doesn't feel like she has a choice.
Right. Robin calls her out on this later in the book too. It's like, I think that Agatha is guilty of thinking, you know, she could always tell me no. Like I'm giving her a choice. But I think all women know sometimes it feels like you very much cannot say no. I think Amira faces that a little bit too in Such a Fun Age. Like when Alex asks her to stay after and have a drink, of course she can say no, but she wants to keep her job and she doesn't want Alex thinking that she's not like a personable, fun person. So there's a lot of things that we feel pressured to do because of the age, status, and power of other people. Yeah.
But also the role as well, when you think about someone who's a babysitter in a position of authority, someone that has to kind of be trusted, someone that has to be responsible. With the RA, you have to be trusted, you have to be responsible. And it's interesting to see them balance being this very kind of sturdy and assured person, but also kind of erring on the side of like, oh, this feels like it could be quite risky, and that's sort of like playing about.
I agree. I think that age of women, we just place so much trust in people sometimes and assume that they want the best for us, and that's not always the case, unfortunately. And I love to take areas where we do feel comfort. Still, to this day, if I need something, I'm probably going to find a Black woman who's trust, like she knows what she's doing. But I like to play with those notions of trust within my fiction.
I want to talk a bit about Kennedy because I find her such a relatable character.
Oh, good.
Obviously, I'm not rich, I don't come from a rich family, but there is something about, you know, we spoke about before, this struggle with choice. Like, do I go to this place where I know there's going to be loads of cool people, or maybe there won't be? So maybe I should go there. And you kind of talk about her thinking so much about making the decision that in the end she can't even make the decision. And one thing that I found particularly interesting about her is this sort of buying all of these self-help books and spending money on like development and personal development. And I think that's something that's fed a lot, particularly to women. Even online now, every single person on TikTok, every single person on Instagram is now giving advice. And it's like, it's quite overwhelming. As soon as I open the app, it's like, believe in your dreams, work hard. If you don't love yourself, no one will love you. And it kind of just feels a bit like we're in we're being overwhelmed with self-help. And I wonder, what is it about, I guess for someone like Kennedy, purchasing these self-help books, like what is she actually trying to attain? Where is she trying to be?
Yeah, poor Kennedy. And it's so funny because I had a lot of younger people read earlier drafts just to make sure I was getting everything right. And they all had a really strong response to Kennedy. They were like, I know this girl, I've met her in my life, and I feel bad for her, but stay away from me. Like her, like loneliness and desperation was really like familiar to them. And I think a lot of people probably are doing what she's doing right now. In terms of her, you asked such a good question. Yes. What was it?
Like, why does she feel the need to like buy self-help? And also just in general, self-help for younger women. You know, you are seeing women younger and younger. Even my little sister's buying these like, you know, 100 ways to make your life cool or whatnot. And I'm like, just go to school.
Just live your life.
You know what I mean? It's like, why do we need to be kind of taught how to be humans even though we're like fully formed people?
Totally. And it's funny because Kennedy even says, she's like, I don't have like enough time to like learn how to be a person here. And just me personally, I think, unfortunately, the way that humans are wired, you learn more from doing than you do by reading something. And like, you just have to know what that thing feels like in order to know what's better for you in the future. But Kennedy is a person who has had a very traumatic instance happen to her, and she's trying to figure out who she is in the world again. And so she goes to this new dorm, she wants to make friends, and she feels like friends operate the way that like a credit card does, where it's like you need good credit to get a credit card, but you can't get a credit card unless you have good credit. And she's like, how do I manage this, and who am I, and what do I buy, and how do I talk? She just feels completely crippled. And so when she feels nervous, she goes and buys stuff. She goes to Target and gets a little face mask, little DVD, and like that makes her feel better. And she doesn't think that she has a deep relationship to money, but she is truly like belonging to consumption, and that's a huge part of who she is. She also has a really close relationship with her mother. Kennedy and Nichelle have a really special bond, especially because she's the youngest of 6 children, and her father passed away. But a lot of their relationship is based on buying things too. It's like, oh, let's go to Target, let's like buy these things, and like let's make something, let's buy this book together. I'm interested in relationships that rely on money being spent. I don't know if you read The Cut ever. There was an article out recently. It went kind of big, and it was about someone who spends like tens of thousands of dollars on therapy and vacations to be with her husband. And she didn't get into it the way I wanted her to. I just want to be like, if you have to spend that much money to get along with someone, is this a great relationship? I don't know. And I think it's a really interesting thing of people getting along when a certain amount of money is spent. Yeah.
And also, like, just friendship in general, I feel like, you know, you can't, I mean, you could buy friends, you can buy friends, but like, are they actually going to be kind of real decent friends? And I think like the exploration of like female friendships in this book is really interesting. Like, how, for you, how did you want to approach it in a way that didn't kind of feel like, I guess, you know, you talk a lot about not judging these characters, and so how did you kind of put these characters like on the page, but also how did their friendship dynamics work? And how did that inspire you?
It's really important for me that any friendship group, you're like, oh, I see why you guys are friends. Like, you have to have something in common. You guys have to like bond over something. And I am really interested in like the really sad phenomenon of like when you work somewhere and you're such good friends with someone, and then you stop working in that place and you don't have that bond anymore, and you're like, oh no, what are we going to talk about a little bit? So I wanted to play with that a little bit. I think friendships are so complicated and like heartbreaking, and I have personally felt like more torn up about a friendship ending than like an actual relationship. I wanted to play with friends taking others' words and like pretending that they're that friend sometimes. I think these are all things that like women have to deal with all the time. I think that women are used to benefiting from friendships more than men in certain ways, from girls' trips to book clubs to like private talks, but I also think that they're used to exploiting each other in a lot of ways too, for their youth, for their beauty, what have it. And so there's a lot of friendships that are built on really taut lines in this book, but I think that's pretty realistic.
And you've spoken about friendship in this book being a commodity. I found that really interesting. What did you mean by that?
Kennedy feels like her worth is in how many friends she can get. Like, her contribution to society will be seen with how many people want to hang out with her. Millie comes back to school wanting friends, like a boyfriend and a house. She's like trying to collect these things rather than looking for people with like-minded values that she can be with. And also Millie and Agatha have a really interesting relationship because Agatha is paying her to help her with her project, but they become really friendly. I'm really interested in relationships where it's like, we get along, things are good, we're kicking it, but like, you pay me and I can't mess this up. So I can't say just everything. I wish there were a lot more books about female friendship, because I think that the intensity of them is really visceral sometimes.
Trust. And I've seen like you know, you see these stories of like fallouts over things like birthdays or you know, bridal parties or hen nights that weren't organized properly, or someone wants to dye their hair pink on your wedding day and it becomes a huge thing. And like when you kind of leave the university space, you kind of see your friends only on maybe big things like a christening, a wedding, and so then those events hold so much weight. And then when you mess up on one of those days, it feels like, oh, you're trying to destroy me. That's what this must be. But actually it's because there's no sort of like intimate way to hang out with people or get to know people outside of, we're going to this dinner and you need to be on time for this. And so it makes all of your friendships feel so much more intense. That's
a really great point. I think it goes the opposite way too. Like, if you only see your friends at big events and your friend's having a bad night, you're like, oh, so-and-so's annoying. And it's like, no, she just had one bad night, but you don't see her very often. And so like now that's coloring your situation with her. We do not live in a village anymore. It is so sad. I think the village is kind of representative in like this campus area too, where you see people all the time and you just like figure it out. But it's not like that post-college.
The next thing I want to talk about is like ethics and secrets, because that is a big part of this book. Eavesdropping, gossip. What is it about secrets that make us feel kind of so guilt-ridden, like knowing them or sharing them, but we still want more? It always just feels like such a guilty treat.
Okay, I have a hot take on this. I like gossip a lot. I do. But it has to be done a certain way. The gossip that I don't want any part of is like, oh, look at how like ugly that girl, like I don't want to hear that. Like I think any kind of gossip that's like about something that someone can't change, I don't want to hear it. Like, that's just not good gossip to me at all.
What's good gossip?
Good gossip is like, oh girl, like, did you see how so-and-so acted in workshop? Like, I can't believe she said that. Like, good gossip, I think, is about human behavior. But the thing that I like most about gossip is not the actual gossip. I like gossip for two reasons. One, it is a gateway into deeper friendships. Like, you start off with a friend, so many girlfriends I'm still friends with today, like 10 years ago, you're like, oh, that guy did something weird, and that's so, and like 2 minutes later, you're like, anyway, so I don't think I love my mom anymore. And like, it like leads you into deeper things, and it's just like, it just forms a deeper bond. But two, I think when you're gossiping with someone, you are signing like an invisible contract with them. You're saying like, oh, so-and-so was late, that was so rude, blah, blah, blah. And you're basically saying, I want people to respect my time. And you're wanting them to like respect that and get on board with you, and you're putting trust in them.
Yeah.
So I think that we are obsessed with gossip and learning secrets, one, because it's fun, but two, it's kind of a way of expressing our desires as humans.
Right.
And like what we look for in the world. And also I think that if you gossip with someone, you can get close enough that they can be like, hey, that thing you did, like, I don't think she liked that. And having someone gently guide you into like the right behavior, I think makes a really good friend.
Yeah. But this is where it works, right? Because like between friends in intimate spaces, but then what happens when you hear something and you take it and you kind of tell that story? And that's obviously what this book deals with a lot, like who gets to tell whose story and why. And I kind of want to know a bit more about why you kind of picked this particular scenario to kind of build the book around.
Oh man, in a really simplistic way. Okay, listen, so many authors will be like, I wanted to dive deep into the world of this. And I'm like, you just liked it. Like, like, I think that is a totally fine place to like approach your writing of like, I think this is interesting. I wanted to hang out with these characters. And for me, I loved this world where this academic woman was like obsessed with youth speech and like wanting to uncover what was going on there. But on a deeper level, I would say, like, why I wanted to tell this story this way. This felt like the best merger between entertainment and the actual facts I had seen in real life. It was like merging the plotty, you know, guilty feeling with the loneliness that I had seen in interviews and in the numbers. I think my favorite fiction works on two levels, where you can read it for those bigger themes, but also you can forget about those and just go on a ride with characters.
And it was something like what I kind of loved, because we've spoken about the cut a lot in this conversation, and obviously it comes up in the book as well, but also ends up being Team Bergen. It's just like it's really interesting, because those spaces, like maybe in 2017 they probably held more weight than they do now, and we kind of live in a time where people are telling the world their kind of most embarrassing stories. You go on TikTok and it's like, get ready with me when I tell you why my dad abandoned our family to become a breakdancer. Like, the whole thing. But it's like, you know, now when we're kind of revealing the worst things that have ever happened to us, or the worst things we've ever done, I guess what is the role in telling other people's stories when they just want to tell it themselves?
That was a really good question. And that's something that I've thought about a lot with books, because a lot of authors now, when they come out with a book, publishing teams will be like, okay, do you like want to write about any trauma? Do you want to like use your stuff in any way? And then it's like your book comes out and you're like, oh, hey, go pay behind this paywall to read about like how, you know, my mom beat me or whatever. And it's like, this is really weird, like the way that we're sharing stories. I think that I like writing about gossip in this way because it feels like the most pure way of sharing this stuff. I think talking to a camera, listen, I look at TikTok, and if someone was like, oh, get ready with me, well, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm ready. At the same time, do I think that's good for us to talk to a screen all the time? No, I think it's terrible. And so I'm trying to get away from that and heighten the good gossip in my novels.
Yeah. And I mean, this is always a tough question, but I think it's a good one to end on. Like, if there was something readers should take away from this book, what is it?
Oh,
if there is anything, because there might
I respect that. Thank you. Truly, not every author agrees with me. I think a novel is meant to entertain. Like, number one, my concern is that you're like, ooh, I'm going to do one more chapter, but then I have to go to bed. Like, that is what I really want a novel to do to me. the novels that I really love kind of haunt me and follow me throughout my day a bit and show me gestures and things, and I'm like, ooh, that is what that would be, or you know, that is what that looks like. And I do love it when novels shed light on the world that we live in. I have a lot of characters who make a lot of really bad decisions within my novel, but it's also a place where some students have to work to live on campus and some just get to hang out. And so I do hope that my novel is a place for people to zoom out and be like, well, wait, why is this a thing? And maybe she should just have money. Any kind of art that makes me look more critically at the world we live in is what I like to read.
But it's amazing as well, because all of the research that went into it, you say, you know, you read lots of academic papers, but also just like, I feel like through reading your book, I have a better understanding of like the American healthcare system and how absolutely insane it is. And so like, gosh, it's really made me think a lot about like what healthcare looks like in different places of the world and how it affects people. But it's just like, it's quite fascinating stuff, actually.
I love it when like a character will show me something without like shoving it down my throat. And I will talk about healthcare all day. So I appreciate that.
I love that. Well, it's been a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much. And you can buy this book from any trusted retailer, or you can buy it from Fane. Thank you so much for speaking to me.
Thank you so much. That was lovely.